There is no Planet B, the warning today from environmental protesters outside the climate conference in the South African city of Durban. The United Nations Climate Change Secretary said she believed there would be a new agreement to cut greenhouse gas emissions, but so far all the players seem to be waiting for each other to blink. Asha Tanna reports.
Behind the upbeat tempo of these environmental protesters lies a stark message. Global carbon emissions are now at record levels. Data released by the scientific community claims the world is headed for irreversible climate change in 5 years, unless we all do more. But as world ambassadors gather for the latest summit in Durban, the conference meets under a cloud.
It's not easy. Time is definitely against us. As you have said, policy is behind science, but it always has been.
A backdrop of economic growth and fast-rising populations in Asia means energy demands in emerging economies is spiralling. Scientists say continued increases in temperature could have a catastrophic effect on the planet, something future generations will be left to face.
If we don't get global carbon emissions coming down by 2020, the chances of holding global warming to 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, which is widely seen as the real danger point, those chances will have gone.
The European Union wants to establish a new emissions reduction agreement by 2015 that would come into effect by 2020. But there is scepticism whether this will be achieved in Durban. The world's first collective stab at tackling climate change was adopted in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit. A treaty was approved by 190 countries to measure global temperature increases and its impacts. But this was on a voluntary basis only. 5 years later, the Kyoto Protocol was born, a more stringent, legally binding agreement committing only wealthy nations to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, the main greenhouse gas blamed for heating our planet. But even those countries only agreed to do this over a 5-year period. The Kyoto Protocol runs out next year. Successive UN climate change summits in Copenhagen and in Cancun in the last 2 years have failed to renew or produce a second long-term commitment. And all eyes are now focusing on Durban. But negotiations have stalled. The US is looking towards India and China to cut emissions before it also commits. China argues it's acting within the treaty.
Actually, China are very open to the legally binding issue, as we had already been party to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and also we are party to the Kyoto Protocol.
The US is not, though. In 1999, it was the world's largest carbon polluter. In second place were the 27 members of the European Union, with China in third. But in the last 10 years, China's extraordinary pace of industrialization has seen its emissions double. The International Energy Agency estimates by 2035, China could produce as much carbon dioxide as the US, the EU and Japan combined. But if all the big emitters refuse to commit to legal targets at the Durban summit, the damage caused to our planet will become ever harder to reverse.